KSI versus Joe Fournier just wrapped up on Misfits Boxing 007, the main event, ending in controversy, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down the full fight frame by frame. As you can see in the face-off, both guys looking focused and confident that they can beat each other. They touch gloves and we're on to the first round. KSI coming into this fight with a different approach than his last one. He's recently talked about his bounce and perfecting it, where he bounces back and forth in a karate stance with his hands swaying by his waist, which is what got him his original knockout over Face Temper. In this fight, he starts with his bounce. He starts on his toes, throwing jabs to the body of Joe Fournier. And early on in this fight, around 15 seconds in, he lands a big right hand. He was able to set this up by throwing his lead hand a little bit forward and just exploding into range and snapping Joe Fournier's head back with the right. Quick shot that Joe Fournier actually ate pretty well, and KSI got right back onto his toes, bouncing again. You see Joe Fournier with a little bit of an awkward frame, while KSI is bouncing around, leaving his lead hand up and down, while also slightly feigning his way forward with steps, always keeping his opponent guessing, which is definitely a great asset for him. He's unorthodox and it's hard to see where he's going to go, especially those who are used to fighting traditional boxers. KSI definitely is not that, and that can definitely work to his advantage. Then we see KSI go for another wild right hand, which Joe Fournier actually catches him with a jab and stops KSI in his tracks. So a good shot there from Joe, but it didn't really phase KSI. He goes back to exactly what he was doing. And then we get another exchange here where Joe Fournier throws a jab while KSI darts a right hand to the side of Joe Fournier's head. It looked like it did land clean to the temple, but Joe Fournier did complain that it was back of the head as he leaned into the shot and ended up with his back facing towards KSI. Some good shot selection proceeding from KSI. He frames with his jab and comes in with an uppercut, which is hard to tell whether it lands or not. And then as they enter the clinch, it looks like KSI accidentally trips Joe Fournier over his shoe, which the ref warns him to keep it clean. KSI has gotten a lot better at being able to blitz and get in and then out of range quickly. See here, he darts a quick jab and then quickly gets out of range and makes Joe Fournier's jab miss. He's adapted his style to be more of a karate blitzing. He's always on his toes, he's always moving, and it's important for him to never stay in the pocket too much. If he wants to get in, he got to get out as soon as possible, as that is what his style is based on, so he does a good job of that here. Another jab to the body from KSI, and a sharp right hand to the belt line of Joe Fournier. KSI then throws a jab, but while Joe Fournier gets his head off the center line, looking to counter with a left, but goes off balance as he starts to clinch KSI, and KSI throws a darting right hand, which seemed to have grazed the back of the head of Joe Fournier. Definitely not a good position to be throwing a hard shot like that, which he ends up with his back turned to Joe, and then while turning around, he gets clipped with a right hand, with his hand down and not defending it. A hole in KSI's defense here. It looked like as soon as Joe Fournier got on the front foot a little bit, he was able to land a clean shot on KSI when his back was against the ropes. So for what KSI wants to do, it's important that he does stay in the center of the ring, which he does get back to doing. KSI feigning his way into range more. He just looked like he did have control of this fight from beginning to end. He landed a clean jab here while getting his head off the center line and making Joe Fournier miss. He just looked faster and the more powerful fighter, with a better game plan where he was able to hit and not get hit. We then KSI do something that we've never really seen him do before. Before he even gets into range, he's blitzing forward and stutter stepping, moving his hands across his chest as well as his foot position as if he's changing angles. And he does this a couple of times, and while Joe Fournier doesn't even really know what he's looking at or what KSI is setting up, this led perfectly into a straight right hand which KSI was able to land. But with that success, KSI then tried to do it again, and Joe Fournier caught him on the inside with a clean counter. A simple left hook that halted KSI's rhythm, which is what will happen when your opponents start reading your patterns and you continue doing the same thing over, which is why I don't think he really did this again in the fight. KSI looks to just barely miss a overhand over the top of Joe and gets back to feigning his way into range before reaching for a long overhand right, which does graze Joe Fournier, but not the best shot to go for here. KSI was really far from his target. He could have went for a straight right to the body, which definitely would have been much more effective here. Over 2 minutes in, it seems like KSI finally decided to switch gears and stop bouncing for a bit as he gave Joe a little bit more of a traditional look, trying to bait him in for a big right hand, which he throws impressively fast and pretty short. Joe Fournier does a good job of reading this well and getting out of range. And then coming forward without his bounce, KSI got caught a couple times coming in with Joe Fournier's jab, trying to land a right hand to the body, which didn't get through. And then some more looks from both fighters, not really punching for the rest of the round. And yeah, pretty dominant round for KSI, who was able to land a couple overhand rights, some straight jabs, and just overall dictated the pace and the tempo of that round. He was keeping Joe guessing with his bounce, and he was looking sharper than we've ever seen him so far. And then the second round began as KSI went back to his bounce, throws a couple of jabs to the body and head of Joe Fournier. But with both of these, he really ducks his head and doesn't really look at his opponent. A bad habit of KSI that he seems to do when throwing straight punches and even overhands, which he could definitely tidy up. Then he lands a pushing right hand to the shoulder of Joe, and then rips a short overhand right, not really able to gauge the distance of Joe. Something interesting in KSI's overhand right is it definitely looks different than what we've seen before. Instead of using his feet to get into range and coming forward and looking sloppy, where he would be more prone to counters, he's throwing from his original position instead of just leaping forward and throwing haymakers. He tightens it up with the bending of his back knee and throws it much shorter and faster than the looping punch that we used to see from him, where he would just come over the top and fully extend his arm out, which Joe Fournier then tries to land a couple of shots. And while his head is all the way down, KSI manages to get out of the way of all 3 shots. Some pretty impressive instincts there from KSI, which we didn't know he had. They then exchange jabs and KSI starts to take over. KSI changes it up with the next one, as while he's throwing his jab, he's parrying Joe's. And while he lands a flush jab on Joe Fournier, he's parrying Joe's shot, not taking any damage and showing his fight IQ in that sequence. A weird sequence then follows as KSI throws his left hand out, and with Joe barely moving, he misses his target. And instead of getting out of the way or bringing his hand out, he kind of just leaves it there and takes a right hand to the dome. A defensive gap shown there by KSI, but it happens. Obviously in boxing, you're gonna get hit. He lands a similar right hand to the one he did in the first round to the body of Joe, and goes back to bouncing as well as feinting. Really staying loose in this fight. He's always on his feet. He's always bouncing. The more he gets in the ring, the more comfortable he looks. He's on his toes in this one especially, and he's looking to get that shot that will end things. He goes for it again 1 minute into the round. Tries to go for another straight right to the body, which does miss, and with KSI's head all the way down and not looking at any shots coming, Joe Fournier definitely could have countered him, which is dangerous for any higher level opposition KSI may want to fight, because with his style he does leave himself fairly open to counters, but he is willing to take one shot to give one. And closing into the final sequence, Joe Fournier comes forward, throwing a right hand which lands on KSI's shoulder, and KSI catches Joe Fournier while in the middle of a left hook. Again, instead of being wild with his overhands, he's planted and in his position, able to land it more precise than his previous fights. The hook raises and KSI lands flush on Joe Fournier. One of the most impactful shots of the fight. Looked like Joe Fournier did feel the effects from that. KSI tried to go to the body immediately and looks like it grazed, where Joe Fournier then entered a clinch, and while trying to throw a right hook with all the momentum and Joe Fournier hurt, KSI ends up landing with his elbow, connecting straight on the button of Joe Fournier's jaw, and pretty much just shutting his lights out from there. So yeah, this finishing sequence obviously ending in controversy. You can't throw elbows in boxing, and KSI did throw one here to finish this fight. Regardless, nothing in the moment did get caught, and obviously after the fact, seeing the replays, it is clear that KSI did land with his elbow, even though KSI was controlling a majority of this fight, showing his pace and throwing a couple of right hands. A clear elbow from KSI, but nonetheless, he does get the victory on paper, at least for now. We don't know if the PBA will overturn this or not, as it isn't a professionally sanctioned fight. It is a semi-pro and doesn't go on any official records. But Joe Fournier has said that he will contest the commission on this fight and is hoping for this fight to be overruled a no contest. So I'm not that certain that this fight will get overturned. KSI was looking good. He was bouncing in and out of range, mixing up his shots, going to the body and coming upstairs. He's definitely been honing in on his new style and of course his bounce, his karate blitz. He looked sharper than ever in this fight and showed more versatility than he has before. But it seems like there obviously will be the stigma that he did land on the elbow, and that will be the story of this fight. But nonetheless, a good performance from KSI. An unfortunate ending to what could have been a great fight and a great finish, but nonetheless, yeah, of course, a controversial finish here in this one. Not how anyone would have liked it to end, but it does end like this nonetheless. An elbow to the jaw puts Joe Fournier out, so let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on this fight. But yeah, that's all from this breakdown, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn your notifications on.